The question's been asked, why? The question's been asked, why co-living? Of all of the different investment strategies out there, why did you choose co-living? The basic answer is because I knew the most about it. My short path into real estate, it came through working for a company that does co-living. So PadSplit is the nation's largest co-living platform, and it's got over 16,000 doors. The thing that I ended up learning the most about was the entire marketplace. So for me, it was what I was most comfortable in. The interesting thing about this path of my education was that I got to learn everything, or at least a lot of it. So in relationships that I've had and made with people all over the country, I've got to learn everything that people go through, like this journey. And I ask a ton of questions. So it made it much easier for me to understand that it comes from maybe not me having to learn it myself, but if I'm around other people and I get to ask a ton of questions and I get to benefit from the mistakes that they did. And this is where the power of communities comes in. So I spent pretty much a year and a half, almost 2 years, just meeting all of these investors from so many different communities, whether you're in a mastermind or whether you're in a sub two community, and everybody in between all of these different communities, whether it's a RIA in your local market or whether it is a national community like Brandon Turner's or Charles Yarber's or Henry Washington's or Rob Abasola's. All of these people, what they've done is they've touched a chord with all of these individual real estate investors. My man Jesse, so it's like there's a niche and then there's a community, and then the power lies within those that want to work together, those that motivate, those that actually incentivize or hold somebody's hand and get them over the initial threshold. So for me, I spent almost 2 years just asking questions, asking questions. And then when I was finally comfortable, I took the bold leap of just jumping in. I found a private money lender, and then I bought my first house from a wholesaler. It's a relationship that I developed from over a course of a year. And I identified and found a property that made sense for co-living. It's what I was knee deep in. I wanted to go in and understand the experience that the hosts, the members, everybody experiences within the company that I work for. And so that's how I approached the journey. Is I was inquisitive and I was curious, and I wanted to see if I can apply my almost 50 years of experience being an operator into this business. And that's been the most fun part for me, is that A, I get to do something brand new I've never done before. And then B, I get to take all my previous experience working for companies that did logistics, companies that did customer service, companies that did food delivery, and had a client that had to deal with working with their employees and their proxies, and all of these experiences that I've accumulated for almost 50 years. And boom, I got to apply them to this new business. And that's been the most fun part of the journey. Is it's not like starting brand new. It is, I get to go and tap into all these resources that I've accumulated, all these experiences and road rash and pains and successes and glories. And then I've been able to apply so many of these into this world. So I started with one single property. And I know in the real estate world, people talk about doors and doors and doors. And that's kind of like a badge of courage for some. But for me, just started with one. I needed to understand the whole process from beginning to end so that when I spoke to hosts, I had a layer of empathy and I was not worried about doing it wrong, or I wasn't worried about preaching, and I was worrying about, speaking from a place of not understanding. And that to me is super important, is having empathy and having the will to seek to understand. And that's a term that I picked up from my client, which was Public Supermarkets. And they have an internal saying, which is anytime there's some kind of human to human interaction, the first thing you should do is seek to understand. I love that. So I seek to understand everything from as many different lenses as possible. So started on my journey, found a house from a wholesaler, bought it for a price that made a lot of sense. It was under market value. and I have a relationship with this person. I wanted him to understand that I'm going to buy multiple homes, so I felt like I got the best deal I could. Work with a general contractor who had a lot of referrals and had a lot of experience. Learned my lessons about working with a general contractor. Worked with a lender. He's still a good friend of mine. Shout out to my man Fernando Corona. So if you're ever looking for DSCR or non-QM loans for pad splits, call him. Tell him I sent you. He's just great. He's a good human being, and I like to partner and work with those kind of people. So he's in my core four, as you would say, or as David Green taught me as I went down this journey of understanding real estate. So found a property, purchased it. I ended up using private money. I purchased the property cash. We did the renovations, paid for that cash, and then I refinanced the property through a DSCR loan. And then we put the furniture in and started it and listed it as a PadSplit host. So, it's like that commercial with the guy that has no hair and is balding. He's like, I'm not just the president, I'm a client as well. That's kind of the mentality that I wanted to take. The beauty of the position that I am in was that I'm an employee of the company as well. So I have access to so much data, which ironically, most hosts have the same access to the data. You just have to ask. You have to be curious enough to ask if it's not offered to you. And the thing that's really fun is that I speak to, we have, just over 1,200 hosts. And then I've spoken to a good majority of them. And then we have almost 15,000 members. And I spend a lot of time. I haven't spoken to 15,000, but I've spoken to a lot of members. So because it's a two-sided marketplace, I wanted to ask as many questions as I could so that my property, which is quote unquote on the supply side, I can market it. I can decide how I want to operate it. I can decide how I want to set it up. I have this vision in my head about what I think co-living can be, should be. No, let me rephrase that. It doesn't have to be or should be anything, but it's what I want it to be. And this is what was really important to me is that I took the approach that this property is my business. This platform just gives me the opportunity to run my business of co-living in a digital manner. And when I looked at it from the entrepreneur standpoint of like, how am I going to take this property, which is its own standalone business? I can have 5 of these in a portfolio, but each individual one is its own living, breathing business because there's humans involved. My house, when I originally bought it, was 3,600 square feet. It's just south of the Atlanta airport. And in this living space, when I walked in with the general contractor, he was so used to other investors who had their own thesis on how to do co-living. And their mentality was, how many bedrooms can I fit into this house? That's not what I wanted to do. I believed of all the things that I spoke with members and of all the troubles and problems that hosts bring up, most of the time it's member to member conflict. And most of the time it starts with petty things and then they kind of build and fester and they become big things. So my approach to it was take these learnings and in my own business, let's see if we can solve for some of these things. And the thing that I kept coming back to was community. How do I build a sense of community in a house so it doesn't feel like 8 rooms, 7 rooms, or 6 rooms of strangers, but how do I choose a community or build or curate intentionally a community inside the property? And that was what I set out to do. So I asked as many questions as I could from the best operators that I knew. And this is ultimately what I ended up with was you start from the very beginning. You don't have to cram in as many rooms as you can, but you have to figure out if it underwrites correctly. So that's an entirely different video that we'll get into is how do you underwrite the property? But for me, I started with what I had in mind as the end point, and I reverse engineered it all the way back to how should I set up the bedrooms? How many people do I want living in this house? How many cars can this house support? And I started going down that path. The house that I started with has 6 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, one of which is a private ensuite bathroom. It has 2 living rooms, one of which, coincidentally, I'm going to actually convert into a 7th bedroom So it'll be 7 bedrooms, 3 baths, which in my own personal opinion is a phenomenal ratio, especially if you can get the pricing correct per week. You can yield the same amount of gross revenue that you would in an 8, 9, even possibly a 10th bedroom, depending upon where your price points are. So for me, I wanted to approach it from, let's see if I can put 6 people into this house. It reduced the amount of conversion that I needed to put in for additional walls. It made getting the appraisal much simpler, because when the appraiser walked through the house, it didn't look like a chopped up, you know, carnival fun house. He didn't understand what it was. When he walked into my house, it just looks like a normal house. Upstairs, there's 3 bedrooms, 2 living rooms, a dining room, and a kitchen. I have an outdoor patio in the back. And then you walk down the stairs, and then there are 3 bedrooms down there. So it was very easy, very straightforward. The appraisal didn't have any problems kind of understanding that those are just additional rooms. They weren't necessarily bedrooms when he walked it. But it made me getting my financing much easier, because the appraisal didn't come back and say, oh my God, there's bedrooms everywhere. I don't understand where to do. What happened to the living room? What happened to the dining room? What happened to the foyer? None of those questions were asked, because for him, it was almost an apples and apples comparisons for when he was doing appraisals. So going back into community, how and why did I set up the community? What does that look like to curate a community in my house? First of all, I started by the listing, which is, how do members actually see and book a room in my house? Well, they can only see it on the digital platform. So I have to be very, very concise about what I'm expecting of my members when they come in and book a room. And that expectation was just very clearly set. In my listing, it tells you I'm looking for professionals that want a quiet, safe environment, but are willing to participate in a community. Very clearly on my listing. And then on it, it says one of the requirements is that we hold a weekly house meeting once a week. Sometimes because of schedules, it may turn into bi-monthly or once a month. But participating and having the willingness and understanding the expectation that you're going to participate in a community meeting, that just made it much easier, because when people read that in the listing, if you don't want to participate in that, it's an open marketplace. There are almost 6,400 rooms in Atlanta that the members could choose from. They didn't have to choose mine. But because I was so forthcoming and upfront about what the expectations were, I feel like I was setting the expectation in the beginning. When the first member moved in, we had a long conversation, as I do with all new members, and we had a phone call. This is how I do my individual screenings. I want to talk to you as a human. And I'm not really sure how it's scalable. I haven't gotten to that point yet. But for me, this was the experience through the lens of the member that I wanted to provide. I wanted to be a hands-on host. I wanted that experience to be that it was personal. I wasn't a corporation. I wasn't a business. I wasn't a faceless thing. I wanted to have a relationship and a conversation with the first member moving in. And I asked him, what are your expectations of living here? I told him very clearly what my expectations were. And then he gave me feedback and says, I'm just, I'd like a quiet community, not a lot of ruckusness, not a lot of noise, not a lot of drama. And he loved the idea of participating in building a community. So for every person that came in after that, I interviewed, and the same expectations were shared. And what ultimately came out of it were people that understood that everybody who subsequently rented a room in that same house, they all shared the same common beliefs. They were going to be respectful. They were going to clean up after themselves. And then they were going to participate in a community. And it's interesting when we say that, because it evolves. Our very first community meeting, there were problems that we had to escalate, right? There were 3 people to share the bathroom, and no one took responsibility for who was actually cleaning the sink or cleaning the bathtub. So once we raised that, the 3 people who shared the downstairs bathroom, they talked it out amongst themselves. One young lady was really frustrated, and she made it very clear that she was very frustrated. And then, so what we ended up doing was we set up a cleaning schedule. So every single person that utilizes that bathroom, they clean one Sunday, the next person signs up, the next person signs up, and it's a 3-week rotation. where they know that there's responsibility of cleaning up the bathroom once a week at least. Kitchen, same thing. We have 6 people that share a kitchen. Well, that conversation we had to talk about. Some person complained that, they cooked something on the range top, left it dirty. That person who left it dirty raised their hand and apologized. And then everybody reset the expectation is that all the pots and pans, which are supplied in the house by me, they're for everybody's use, but there's one set. So if people aren't eating family style, so they individually cook their own meals. So once you reiterated, what's expected, people, they all agreed to cleaning in the kitchen, clean up after themselves after every time they cook and eat. So what I found was the community meeting, it allowed for this de-escalation of tension. And what I've experienced in the past when I spoke to other members was nobody spoke to them and they rarely spoke to each other. I've heard some salespeople and I've heard hosts talk about members are like ships passing in the night. And while it seemed like a novel concept, it didn't make sense to me as an individual. I'm living in a house with 5 other people. How do I just ignore them like they don't exist? And if I treat them like a faceless entity, then the ability to treat them like a faceless entity goes up. I wanted people to understand there's a name, a personality, and a being that they're interacting with, and they're treated more like roommates or housemates than they are just people that happen to rent the room next door and they're anonymous. Um, so the wonderful thing that's come out of this is I have one woman. Her name's Wanda. She's fantastic, but she's more like a house mom, and she makes it very clear. She sets the standard. And it's not that she's a dictator over anybody else, but she goes about handling her business a certain way, and then other people kind of follow in line. So the most beautiful thing that kind of came out to confirm that the community was working was that on Thanksgiving, they were all planning to have Thanksgiving Day dinner. So I had 5 members in the house at that time, and a sixth one. That sixth member actually came from the Thanksgiving Day dinner. So one of our members invited a coworker who didn't have any place to go, and she came, and the whole house had Thanksgiving Day dinner together. And then she ended up asking, "Hey, there's a room available in the house. I'd like to move in. Can you introduce me to the owner?" And that's how I got the 6th room filled, was by a referral from one of the existing members. I took it a step further. When I heard that they were going to have Thanksgiving Day dinner together, I wanted to participate and help promote that community intentionally. So I reached out to Wanda, who was cooking Thanksgiving Day dinner, and said, "Could you please send me a grocery list?" And I went out and purchased the ingredients for Thanksgiving Day dinner, and I provided them to them. To me, that's like I consider that a marketing expense. I view living in my house and treating my clients and the members as clients and customers. For me, the business of co-living that's operating within the property, that business is most successful when it's calm and it's a long-term tenure. So anything that I can do to promote that feeling of this being a community where people want to stay, where when the conversations are happening, they're looking at it from value, just like I would in any other business that I've ever owned in the past, is, am I giving my customers enough value where they want to be sticky and they want to stay with me? Because it is a competitive marketplace. There are 6,000 other doors that are available for people to move into, but is staying at my house and my PadSplit that much better? I'm not sure, because that individual person is the one who's living there. But for that individual customer relationship with me, I want to make sure that I'm reinforcing that it's important to me that I treat them as customers and I respect them as clients. And I want to respect and curate this experience that they chose to stay with me. And for the most part, I've had one member move out, and that was out of a financial termination. And the other 5 members, they've all expressed that they want to stay for, up to a year, which is amazing, because as long as I have consistent revenue, I can make plans and operate my business in a certain manner. And the thing that's really important is that the members who are there when a room is empty, like I have now, they're all actively looking to refer and fill in that sixth bedroom. And now I have somebody who's coming on the 15th of January. Today's the 28th. So for us, that 2 weeks of waiting for the right person who comes from a referral of somebody who knows what's going on in the house, that's de-risking it for me. That's de-risking my business of knowing who's coming in with a referral. It's sticky. And that person was recruited for that last room. So to me, those are the different ways that I promote community. And I think it ultimately boils down to is communication. I think humans, for the most part, just want to communicate, right? They want to be communicated to. And I think the anxiety of not knowing was really, really important. So it's interesting. I reached out to my members and I told them, hey, I work for the company. There's a lot of things that I'd like to test, and they're eager, right? They're eager to participate and give me feedback as a member, because this version of co-living for them, and I've had one member who lived in a previous PadSplit, and we've talked about her experience prior to living in my house. It was two different experiences altogether, which is okay because we are a digital marketplace and it's competitive. And I kind of love that because it allows me as the business owner and entrepreneur the leeway and the freedom to win. And my path is that I want to create something new that not everybody is doing, which has value to my ultimate end customers, which are members. And if everybody else is over here playing the same game of 8, 9, 10 bedrooms in a house, that's their business that they want to choose to operate in. But I don't want to compete in that business. I want to create something new. I've always talked about it with other people, and this is just my own investor journey. This isn't as an employee, but it's just informed with all the data and information that I have access to as an employee, that I think the opportunity of creating a more personalized co-living experience, driving community. And I've heard other co-living operators in the country, like Sam Weigert, he does this, where his true belief is like, hey, if I have good community in a house, better things happen, versus 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 just anonymous people coexisting is very different than co-living. If somebody parks and there's only so much room to get by, being comfortable enough to knock on the door and say, hey, can you move your car over a little bit? Or even better, like we had in our house meeting, they assigned parking spots to each other and everybody was comfortable with that. So that level of expectation was already set. Whether it's the end all be all or not, I just know that my own personal operating experience and approach to this is I believe that you can build healthy communities within a PadSplit or a co-living property, which reduce your end operating costs. Because of the fee structure and the way it's set up, it's advantageous to me to promote referrals within the first people that move into a house. So the next house I purchase, when I start, the first people I'll offer a transfer to would be the people in my own house. Maybe that neighborhood is something they've thought about doing or living in or moving into. Maybe it's closer for them. But at the end of the day, I'm asking for referrals from my pool of members to fill my next house because they know what my brand is. They know that I'll provide cleaning supplies because I've heard from members over and over again, I want to live in a clean house. Why wouldn't I? But I don't think it's right that I'm going to buy cleaning supplies for the entire house. Why am I going to buy Lysol or Pine Sol or Clorox to clean the entire kitchen when I'm one of 8 or 9 people? Why wouldn't the property owner provide the cleaning supplies and then create an environment where the individual members want to clean up behind themselves? It's just a different way of doing it. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just my own decisions as an entrepreneur. I'm just sharing this journey because this is the only journey that I have right now. Right. And I think it's such an amazing experience in business to get into Because as all of you know, real estate as a whole, there's an entire ecosystem where you can be successful. And that's the part that I'm having so much fun in, is that we just bought, it took forever, but me and my partner ended up buying a house, and we're wholesaling it to somebody else. That's just a move toward creating active income. And some of that makes sense because of the learnings that I have. So this property I purchased, it makes a great pad split. And I knew another end buyer who was looking for a property. I wasn't in a place where I wanted to do all the conversion and the renovation. So I sold it to them for a wholesale piece. That is part of the ecosystem that we all live in, is that even within our own little niche of co-living, there are certain properties that just make really good sense. And there's buyers out there who don't have the knowledge or skill or time to go searching for these properties. So whether you're a realtor, or general contractor, or even a wholesaler, you can participate in our ecosystem because there's needs. They're prevalent everywhere. So it's just a matter of kind of finding your niche and participating so that it's a healthy, dynamic and marketplace that would continue to grow. Just think about all of the other marketplaces that are out there, whether it be Amazon, whether it be Uber, whether it be Airbnb. There's so many sub businesses that people have been thriving in for decades because they understand the total business. In our world, as we continue to build out our portfolio, I think 7 to 8 bedrooms is like the sweet spot. If I can get to 6 and the price point is okay and I acquire the property, and that's the most important thing that I've ever heard from seasoned real estate investors. You have to buy right. So the more comfortable I am with underwriting, the more comfortable I am with understanding the financing of real estate. And that's what I think the most exciting piece that I've learned over the last couple of years is understanding the financing of real estate and how to properly use leverage and how to properly reverse engineer whether a deal is a deal. That's a skill. It's not, hey, you got lucky and found a property. No, it was very intentional that I found a property that had good parking in a quiet neighborhood with neighbors that wouldn't complain because I understood what business was going to be operated in that structure. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I hope to kind of help people along this journey is the nuanced pieces that you don't quite know about yet. I want to help you look around corners and think about it as an entrepreneur and reverse engineer your business so that you can make better decisions earlier on in the process. So that's all we got. Talk to you guys next time. If you have any questions about your own journey, about my own journey, feel free to put them in the comments. I read everyone, and it drives a lot of wonderful questions and answers that people are all asking. And that's why I started doing this video series, is because I wanted people to have a forum to be able to ask questions and we can get them answered correctly instead of on a Reddit page and somebody answers craziness and just leads you down a bad path. So hopefully I can get them answered. I promise you, if I can't, I will find the most qualified person to get you an answer for that. Talk to you guys soon.